I've been collecting Necrons for over 20 years, and today we're going to have a look at all of the elite units that I've accumulated over that time. It's coming right up.
Necrons!
Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. Right, today we are looking at the elite units that I've got in my Necron army, this army which I've been collecting for over 20 years. I've made a video on the HQ units and the troop units already, and of course I'm going to complete the series with the rest of the army in the future. Make sure you subscribe and turn on all notifications so you don't miss an upload. So I've been playing Necron since this book here, the 3rd edition Necron Codex. In that codex we only had 3 elite units, and as you can see from the table we've got a lot more now. Believe it or not, only 1 unit from this codex has survived in the current codex. So the first unit was Necron Immortals, which of course have been moved to the troops choice, and I looked at my Immortals in the troops video. The second one is these guys here, the Necron Pariah. I had a lot of fun with these miniatures. They were quite a hard build at the time. They are made of metal, they are fairly fragile on the front of the warsaw, and of course they've got the green rods. For some reason, Games Workshop decided to discontinue these miniatures as the codices progressed. Now I believe they discontinued these miniatures because they introduced a material called Finecast. We had a few new miniatures in Finecast, and the idea was to replace the metal material with the moulds which they already had with Finecast. And let's face it, those warsaws just wouldn't work out very well in Finecast, especially if you wanted to keep those green rods in there. And I believe that's why they discontinued this model. Now they did introduce some new units which potentially have replaced these, but the Necron Pariah is a unit we no longer have in the codex. It was a lot of fun to play this unit. It basically had a warsaw with a built-in Gauss blaster like the Immortals had. They were fairly expensive, 36 points, and they didn't have any will be back special rule, basically reanimation protocol. But a cool model, and I have to say one of my favourites from this codex. Now you may also say that this next miniature is also one of my favourites because I have so many of them, the Necron Flayed one. I've got 60 altogether. I had a lot of fun collecting these miniatures. They're all made of metal. I had to convert some of the claws because I bought them all second hand and some were broken and missing. So some of the claws that you see here were actually made from plastic. I used Hormigaunt talons just shaved down, and then of course green stuff for the skin. I don't own any of the new plastic miniatures or indeed any of the Finecast miniatures. I mean, I've got 60 of these ones, so why would I want any more? I painted the skin in different colours to represent my enemy. I had a buddy that played Blood Angels, so that's what the human type skin was. Then I had another buddy who played Tau, so we've got Tau skin, and of course some green orc skin because my old gaming buddy used to play orcs as well. Now, like a lot of the newer miniatures, of course the bases have got bigger. I'm in the process of adding these base adapters to my units. So 25mm there, and obviously 28mm now with the new base sizes. And that was the only elite units in this book. However, when this book came out at the end of 5th edition, beginning of 6th edition, we had a lot more units added to the elites slot. First, we had a brand new dual kit. This kit could make Triarch Praetorians, a brand new unit, and also Lich Guard. Praetorians were in the elite slot at the time, however now they've been moved to fast attack. I magnetised 10 of my miniatures so I could have them totally interchangeable, so I could have Lich Guard with both weapon options and Praetorians with both weapon options. Now arguably this unit is the unit which actually took over from the Pariah. It is slightly different in terms of the fluff, in terms of the lore, but the lore did change from the 3rd edition codex to this codex, so maybe that was why. Either way, I tried to paint these guys the same as I did my Pariah. I've got 10 of them, which I actually glued together with the sword and board option. I did put different material on the bases so that I can split these units into units of 5 if I want to, and then distinguish which unit is which on the table. I've also got these guys, which are 3D printed proxy models for Lychguard with sword and board. I've got a video on these guys in the archives. I'll link that up actually in the description below for you to check out. But some very different but very cool miniatures. Ideally, I'd like another 5 of these to give me 3 units of 10, but I think 25 Lychguard is pretty reasonable. Right, so next we had another new plastic kit. It was a dual kit. It could make Necron Immortals from the troops slot or death marks from the elites. When these miniatures came out, I was a bit obsessed with having green rods in my army. Any war side that didn't have a green rod, I converted it with a green rod. And when these guys came out with no green rods, of course, I converted them. So I've got green rods in mine. I've only got 7 death marks finished at the moment. I've got more death marks in my pile of shame ready to be done. However, I wanted to play a unit of 10 death marks one day, so I quickly painted 3 death marks just to make my unit up to 10, and that's what those odd 3 models are there for. Going forward, I'm going to have 1 unit with the green rods in. I will convert another 3, and then all of my other units won't have green rods. I've accepted models don't have green rods these days. So yeah, that is my death marks. Now this codex also brought a major change with the C'tans. Originally in the 3rd edition codex, the C'tan was a special character. You actually had to have permission to play a C'tan. It wasn't even in one of the standard slots like heavy support or elites. It was just a special character. But when this book came along, it was slightly different because they were an elites slot. Not only that, but they weren't named character. You didn't have the Nightbringer or the Deceiver. You just had the C'tan. And the C'tan options were variable. So it's 1 entry with lots of different war gear. Now you couldn't duplicate the war gear on each of the C'tans that you took. So each C'tan was unique, but you could basically build your own C'tans. This was probably my favourite era for the C'tans because, well, you could have a full-on C'tan list. So I went a little bit crazy with my miniatures. The 2 C'tans in the 3rd edition codex were, of course, the Nightbringer and the Deceiver. The Deceiver was the first miniature that I painted that wasn't just a Necron dry brushed silver, and I'm really happy how he came out. The Nightbringer is literally just dry brushed, but it still looks quite reasonable. And of course, both of these are the original metal miniatures. They are available still now in Finecast, but mine are metal. So with the new rules here, where you could take different C'tans with different weapons, I thought I would convert a C'tan to give me 3 C'tans, because why not? Now, one of the C'tans which was the most interest to me was the Void Dragon. And one of the pieces of war gear that was in here for the C'tan was the Thunderbolt. So I custom made myself a Void Dragon. This guy just here. Now he of course started life off as a Nightbringer. I'm sure you can sort of tell that. But I had a lot of fun building this guy, and is pretty much built from green stuff. There are videos in the archives about this conversion. I'll link that video up in the description below. But yeah, I did that lightning coming out of his hand to represent the Thunderbolt. Now I also have this guy just here, which I use as a C'tan. Really like this miniature. This was actually given to me in a bag of bits. It was a conversion that somebody else had done, but I put my sort of spin on it. It's basically an epic model. It's an epic Titan miniature. It has an Abaddon arm just here, and of course it's got the old school destroyer gun on this side. And then I added some symbols to it. These little Necron symbols are made of cardboard, I added it to the miniature. This is, of course, is made of metal. And then I painted it and reposed it. And I really like it. These days, I use this miniature as a Transcendent Catan, just because I can. But yeah, another Catan for me. Now, of course, it doesn't stop there, because we have some other Catans as well. As the editions obviously progressed, we gained the Transcendent Catan, which of course is in the Tesseract Vault. I did magnetise my one, so he comes out of the vault, and then I can obviously play him as a Transcendent Catan if I want to. Now, I also have this miniature here, which can also stand in as a Catan. I actually use this miniature for Orokin when he's empowered, because in my mind an empowered Orokin would look like a Catan. So that's how I use that miniature, but he can potentially stand in as a Catan. And then, of course, in the 9th edition Codex, we received a brand new Catan, the Void Dragon, and here is my Void Dragon miniature. And what a miniature it is. I love this guy. I really enjoyed painting it. I'm super happy with my paint job. I've got a how to paint tutorial on this guy if you're interested in maybe replicating it. You'll also notice that I have converted it slightly, just one conversion, and that was just purely a personal preference. I basically took his arm and I made it go in the upwards direction rather than coming out. And I filled in all of the gaps and redid his chest here with green stuff, just so that it obviously all matched in. But what an awesome miniature. I love it. Now, talking of awesome miniatures, I've also got a 3D printed stroke resin Nightbringer. This model here by Den of Imagination. What a cool miniature this is. And obviously compared to the original Nightbringer, he's very big. He's sort of in line with the Void Dragon. But I really love this miniature. And now when I use the Nightbringer in my army, I tend to use this miniature. I'm sure Games Workshop will release a new Nightbringer at some point. But for now, I use that guy. Right, back to this Codex release here. We've got another Elites unit added to the Codex. The Triarch Stalker. I have to say, when this miniature came out, I wasn't too happy with it. I didn't like the fact that it wasn't hovering, because, well, pretty much all of the Necron vehicles previously that I'd known were hovering. I actually made a hovering base for this guy. However, these days I've mellowed a bit and I've accepted that it just walks on its legs like it should do. Not sure what happened. I think sometimes you just get stuck in your ways, but there you go. So, of course, I've got the front two legs here movable, and he is fully magnetised, so I can take all of the weapon options off, have all three different weapon options. So that's the Triarch Stalker. Pretty cool model, a nice addition to the army. I do have two more, which I need to finish. They need some tender loving care. They were given to me, so I need to work on those. But at the moment, I've got one, and hopefully I'll get to play it at some point in 9th edition, because I haven't played it yet. So from the 5th edition Codex upwards to the 7th edition Codex, we had no changes to the Elites slot, with the exception of the Nightbringer Deceiver coming back. However, when 9th edition came out, we got another massive batch of Elite units. The first one was the Reanimator, which of course was in the Indomitus box set. I bought two Necron halves of the box set, so I've got two miniatures, and I converted one of them, as you can see. A pretty cool model, and definitely a new aesthetic to the Necrons, which actually, to be fair, 9th edition brought a lot of new aesthetics to the army. We had a brand new character which had 3 legs and 6 arms, the Hexmark Destroyer. I painted mine so that it's in hyperspace, so it's sort of phasing in and out. And actually I converted one of those as well with a Wraith body, and I changed the wires on the back here as well. I've got guitar string for the wires. Yeah, pretty cool new miniatures. Definitely something very different. Keeping in line with the three-legged theme, of course, we had the Skorpek destroyers. I actually have 18 of these models. I've got 3 units of 6, which of course is the maximum you can take. And of course I've converted these miniatures so that each one looks a little bit different from the others. My favourite one is Mr. Crab, as I call him. I love that pose. To go with the Skorpek destroyers, we had the Plasmacytes. This little critter here, a canoptic plasmacyte. These creatures here buff the Skorpek destroyers. I would like to see them as a sort of war gear option and upgrade to the unit rather than actual separate unit, just because moving and keeping in coherency would be a lot easier. Now I've got in total 8 of these plasmacytes, which I collected obviously from the Skorpek destroyer kits, but also the Ophidian destroyer kits, which we'll look at in the fast attack video. We also had the introduction of these guys, the Cryptothralls, also known as murder buckets because, well, they look like they've got a bucket for a body. I converted 2 of mine from the Indomitus box set. I've got them running, and these are the original poses. A pretty cool miniature. I don't play them much these days, but they help your characters with Lookout Sir. Now, interestingly, this codex had a big shake-up with the heavy support slots, and one of those shake-ups was to maneuver the Canoptic Spider, also known as the Tomb Spider back in my day, into the Elite's slot. Now of course I've got the old metal miniature, and there is a new plastic one which I don't own. These are magnetised onto their bases, and obviously I've got a few conversions just to make them look a little different. I've got 2 units of 3, and my plan is to actually buy the new miniatures as well, so I can have a unit of the new miniatures to give me 3 units of 3. And that is my entire Elite slots units. A reasonable amount, especially if you consider that in 3rd edition we only had 3. Now if you enjoyed this video, I'm going to link up the playlist with all of the other Army Showcase videos in for you to check out next.